much for being here. My name is Avril Louise Clark. I am a clinical sexologist, and I'm here representing the porn conversation tonight. And I'm really, really lucky to have Dr. Bianca Laureano here today. And we are raising money tonight for her nonprofit or her organization, right? ANTE UP. And so this is a really great moment to not only learn about the porn conversation, everything we're about, which Bianca played a huge role in assisting in creating the amazing educational materials that there is available on the porn conversation, but also learning about all the great work that Dr. Bianca Laureano does in her life in general. And so thanks so much, Bianca, for being here. We're going to start doing the workshop, Why Porn Literacy Belongs in Sex Education. So just a little bit of housekeeping. As mentioned before, you're going to hear a little ding-dongs a little bit at the beginning, because sometimes at the beginning of these workshops, people are still trickling in. So thanks so much for that and your patience. We are recording tonight's session. You are only going to be seeing the presentation part of the workshop. We cut it down. So none of the waiting time at the beginning. And I will be sending it out to all participants, whoever signed up through Eventbrite, tomorrow. And yeah, so if at any point things get cut short, you want to tune in later, you are more than welcome to do that. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them through the chat, and we will be answering them at the end of the workshop. Obviously, if you prefer to keep it anonymous, I also want to respect that. You're welcome to send any questions to us at our email address, talk@thepornconversation.org. And there I will be happy to communicate with you. I do ask, because the chat boxes are open, that you use respectful language. We want to create a space where no one feels ashamed or discriminated against. This is all about what the porn conversation is about. We want to have these shame-free conversations. We want to create spaces where we don't hold back on asking any of the questions of why we're here today. And so this is going to be something that's really important, and why we have also the help of Eleanor in the chat box to make sure we're all being respectful. And yeah, I think everything as far as the little housekeeping part is covered. I want to now hand it over to Dr. Bianca Laureano, and she will be giving a little introduction on herself and what she's here today representing.
Thanks, Avril. Hi, everyone. I'm Bianca. And as Avril shared, I'm a sexuality educator and curriculum writer, and I collaborated with Avril and the Porn a few years ago to help build this curriculum for parents and teachers and trusted adults in young people's lives. It's a really amazing offering that's free. And I've been doing this work since 1996. I started as a young person working as a peer educator. I'm also one of the co-foundresses of the Women of Color
I think we may have lost Bianca for a second. Let's see.
Technology is not our friend today.
She's back.
I'm always like, how is this the future when we can't get the things to work? But yeah, I'm great. I'm happy to be here. I've now started to offer trainings online and in virtual spaces through ANTE UP Professional Development, where we fill in the gaps of a lot of what our training has left out. So we teach classes on abortion, we teach classes on media literacy and net neutrality and other important topics that impact the work that we do with sexuality professionals across the globe. So thanks so much for having me here, and I'll be sticking around for questions and answers as well. Thanks, Avril.
Thank you, Bianca. Great, thank y'all so much. I did give a brief introduction, but I just wanted to reintroduce myself, I guess. Yeah, I'm a Miami born and raised, Barcelona-based clinical sexologist, and I'm the brand manager of the Erica Less nonprofit project, The Porn Conversation. As Bianca mentioned, we worked on the educational materials together, and I think Bianca is just amazing. So I'm really excited that she's here today and joining us. And it was such an honor to work with her on there, and I learned so much. And I hope today y'all will learn a little bit about the work that we do. I'm also an intimacy coordinator, so I work as a liaison between production and performers on ethical porn productions. This is something that I feel really adds to the porn literacy work that I do, because we will get to it a bit, but I do think a really important part about teaching media literacy or teaching porn literacy is understanding the fact versus the fantasy, which plays a huge role, especially when it comes to porn, right? So being able to be part of this process and understand what goes on behind the scenes and get really to work more personally with sex workers has been actually really fruitful as far as how I'm able to then bring this information to adults and families and educators of young people. So really grateful for this. I don't think it's possible to talk about the porn conversation without talking about who's behind it, right? Who created this? So I did mention Erica Lust. Erica Lust is a mother of teens and an ethical adult porn director and producer who creates sex-positive adult cinema. She created this project, The Porn Conversation, along with her husband, Pablo, and they sought out to provide families like themselves with tools to offer this comprehensive sex education for young people, especially sex ed that includes the topic of porn, because they were finding that it just wasn't out there. So not only was Erica kind of pioneering and figuring out ways to reinvent porn, right, in a way where there was more women involvement and in a way where it was more representative of and relatable, but also recognizing that, you know, free online porn is the most accessible porn on the internet. It's what young people are more likely coming across, of course. And so this was still a discussion that needed to happen. And I think that, you know, we talk about the porn conversation because we're trying to also reinvent the idea that there's the talk, right? This like one important talk that you have in a young person's life, especially as a trusted adult or parent, and you're just going to have to figure it all out, right? And you have this one shot. And so the porn conversation is really about having continued conversations that is supporting a young person's life. And so it's really an important time in our history to be promoting this kind of work, right? And having these resources that are available online for free, because the current state of sex education, especially in the US, is you know, pretty troubling. So it's not only a US-based issue, it's quite global. You know, I think that we can all do a better job as trusted adults to bring this education, right? In homes, at schools. I know it's not as easy to do it in schools in most countries than we would hope. But it's just, you know, this gives you a glimpse of what it's been like in the US. You know, only 16 of the states that require sex education give instruction on how to use condoms or contraception in the states. Only 9 states include information on consent, right? And 7 states have policies that include affirming sexual orientation instruction on the LGBTQ plus identities and sexual health for the LGBTQ plus youth. 9 states actually explicitly require that instruction discriminates against LGBTQ plus people. These are shocking facts. You can find these on SIECUS, SIECUS.org. And basically, what we tried to do at the Porn Conversation was not only create these materials that are going to be free and easily accessible, because there's a lot of information out there, almost too much. It's like information overload, especially for parents of young people, educators of young people. But what we were trying to do is really create the sex education that we wish we had, right? Sex education that is sex positive, that's inclusive, that is in a way that is easily understood. And you'll see if you go through our resources. Bianca actually gave me the great advice of scripting the materials. And so anyone anywhere can pick it up and really read from it in a way that is easy to use, right? So that was something that was really part of our like core identity as a sex education nonprofit project. So when we think about porn and we think of why we need to be having these conversations around porn literacy, you'll hear me use the term free online porn, because what I mentioned earlier was that free online porn is the most accessible porn found on the internet today. And it receives more traffic in total than both Amazon, Twitter, and Netflix combined, with millions of viewers each day. It's estimated also that children are first exposed to pornography at 11 and as young as 8. And I'm not here at all to fearmonger or to throw these statistics at you to be fearful. What I'm hoping this does by the end of this evening or this workshop is that it empowers you and brings an understanding that it's actually only natural that young people are curious about sex. It's only natural that they're seeking out this information, especially when sex education is not so easily available to them. So oftentimes porn becomes one's first exposure to sex. And when you don't really have the knowledge and the understanding, it can cause a lot of emotions in a young person, right? It can be traumatic, it can be confusing. And so this is really why we're campaigning for these conversations to destigmatize the conversation of porn, that we need to be talking about it because it's quite popular, right? So how can we approach this in a way that is helpful and supportive and not harmful to a young person? So oftentimes, I really speak mainly to adults, because the idea of the porn conversation is really educating adults to then bring this information to the young people in their lives. But oftentimes I'm met with a very common, I don't know, I wouldn't say argument, but a reaction, right? That's like, no, complete denial. My kid has never seen porn or come across porn or been shown it. And although, it would be ideal that they wouldn't, especially as young as 8 years old, there is a really, there's a power in really understanding where young people are at in the digital age that we live today. So from 8 to 11 years old in the digital age, a young person may have already shown curiosity about their genitalia, about gender awareness, racial stereotypes, and have also possibly asked the famous question, where do babies come from question? And as mentioned before, the average age a child first encounters pornography is 11 years old. So at this age group, it is possible that your child has maybe already been exposed to pornography. So by the age of 8, what children are truly interested in learning is knowing what is myth and what is fact about what they hear about sex. So although this might seem like a young age and truly maybe even too young for porn literacy, it is a really great time to be talking about media literacy, be giving them factual information, be having conversations. with them about their sexual curiosities, about their body, their gender awareness, about the racial stereotypes, and really give them supportive information to grow and not feel shame for their curiosities. From 12 to 15, those great puberty years. So puberty means that, your child is going to be going through a lot of changes. And as a parent or a family member, this might be confusing for you, but just as much for your child, right? I know I didn't really have the support that I needed growing up, going through puberty, and it was confusing. You wish that you had someone to explain to you what was going on and what the changes that were happening were actually, exciting, and it's just a part of life, and it was nothing to feel embarrassed about. But there was this like overlaying shame I felt about how the world is going to react to me now that I am changing, right? And knowing this, and knowing now as an adult that this was an age of hormonal changes, of menstruation, exploring masturbation, to relationships, identity exploration, possibly even sex, to the messages that they're receiving from the media, right? Which includes porn, but also includes social media, right? Influencers, YouTubers, people who are really telling this age group specifically of how they should feel, what they should wear, what they should look like, how they should behave, and what kind of actions and behaviors and looks will get you the most attention, the most likes. This can be a confusing time, although it's, really exciting, and the internet can be an amazing place to learn things and explore and connect. It's really nice to feel that support from the older person in your life, a trusted adult in your life. So by this age, chances are a child or a teen has already seen porn, and not always because they're purposely seeking it out, but oftentimes even by accident. I don't know if there's any adults out here today in the workshop, but I know I've come across porn when I was just Googling something before. It's not always purposefully done. So we owe teens and children the same grace in that aspect too sometimes, right? So at this age also, there are a lot of sexual rumors, right? Especially if one has, people around them of the same age group that are maybe beginning to explore their own identity or explore their sexuality. But the reality is like, a lot of these rumors will not be true. Some may be true, but also not having the support of sex education, if they don't have that, it's really up to the trusted adults in their lives at home as well to have these conversations with them and to get factual information about sex and sexuality, something that's comprehensive and hopefully sex positive. Now to our third age group. So as you see, we went 8 to 11, 12 to 15, and 16 up. These age groups actually also correlate with how we have grouped the educational materials. So you will be able to not only receive this information, but also a bit more of how to provide this education and information for these age groups. So if a young person in your life is, 16 years old or more in the digital age, they will be continuously having, physical, social, emotional changes from their puberty years. They're also continuing to grow up into this world, even more so deep into the social media, about oversaturated messages, right? So this can bring a lot of social pressure, both online and offline. And by this age, your child is likely to watch porn, and possibly on a regular basis. So it is vital to create an open and honest dialogue with your teen at this age. What you want to do is always to create this positive guidance in your child's life, but also give them to the space to then be able to keep continuously coming to you, right? In the future, the hopes, right? So I know it's not always the easiest thing to hear, and I don't also want to make assumptions. This is always this is always true that a young person may not be coming across porn, but the likelihood of it being them coming across or being shown it is always there. And if it's not porn, then it's sexualized imagery or sexualized media. So understanding also that you as an adult hearing this information, whether or not you enjoy, are indifferent, or completely detest porn, young people will be exposed to it at some point. And so I think there's one point, no matter where you lay on that spectrum, that you can agree on, I hope, which is porn is an unrealistic and not an ideal guide to understanding sex. And the issue is that young people are led to believe the fictitious stories that porn creates are real. So basically, not ignoring this topic is being a proactive adult in their lives, and is not adding to the confusion in their lives. So with the porn conversation and our materials, the heart of our project is teaching porn literacy. And porn literacy works in a similar way as media literacy. That's what Bianca was sharing with earlier that she teaches. And media literacy has been used in educational frameworks for decades. And the goal of porn literacy is to help consumers become more critical to the media that they are exposed to, and understanding that porn is a type of mass media today is essential to then being able to redirect media literacy towards porn. So the 5 key questions of media literacy are: who created this message? What creative techniques are used to attract my attention? How might different people understand this message differently? What values, lifestyles, and points of view are included or omitted? And why is this message being sent? So I don't know if y'all ever used media literacy back in school, but I, have very clear memories of using it back in high school, dissecting, I don't know, 1984 or some other novel with my English teacher. And it was really great because it allowed me to not only just read something and be affected by it so strongly, but it allowed me to question it. Who wrote this? Who created this? We can do the same thing with porn. So if we were to go to any of the free online porn sites today, and I think we know a few of them perhaps off the top of our head, some of the big tube sites were completely, met with just a multitude of messages, right? So if I'm going to figure out, well, who created this certain film, that's not always clear. I think the transparency behind that is troublesome. Sometimes we're not really sure who is behind this. What creative techniques are used to attract my attention? Lighting, editing, storylines, anything from the categories to the titles to the content. And how might different people understand this message differently? I think something that we see oftentimes in porn include, the sexualization of the LGBTQ plus community, misogyny, violence, and understanding that different people have different identities, whether or not it's gender, race, sexual orientation, are going to be affected by this piece of media differently as a viewer. What values, lifestyles, and points of view are included or omitted in this? And why is this message being sent? Well, possibly to bring pleasure, right? Or that's what they're hoping for, but also, to make money, power. There's so many things that we can question about the content that we're being met with online, especially in free online porn. So this is just a little glimpse of the beginnings of media literacy. This is how we get the ball rolling with these questions, and how we're really able to pause, and rather than just be affected directly, to question and to critique and to create our own understandings and meanings from the messages, and decide then how it will affect our lives, right? My understanding about sex, my understanding about sexuality, my understanding about femininity, my understanding of who I am as, a queer person, or who I am in a respectful relationship. What does that look like? So oftentimes when I and maybe Bianca can let me know if she gets this as well too, but when you talk about porn literacy and you go to teach it, the first question I get asked off is like, are you going to show us porn? And luckily with porn literacy, you don't really have to show porn. You actually don't have to show porn at all. I think that especially with the younger ages, like I mentioned before, beginning with media literacy helps make some familiar connections. So when you're talking to younger people, or even when you're talking to teens, or adults, to be honest, start with something they can relate to. A Netflix series. Who created this? What messages are in this? How does this make me feel? Or begin with an influencer that they like to follow. Now, I think another really important part is to refrain from using negative or positive commentary. Really leave it open and ask the young person questions. They're curious. They want to know, they want to learn. And so being kind of that guidance, bringing them that guidance by opening that floor up for them to ask these questions that they may have been wanting to ask, and not just searching for on Google, is going to be really important. Don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions that the child in your life has been exposed to porn or not, that is seeking it out purposefully or not, that is heterosexual or not. So it's really key here to just leave the floor open, create a respectful environment, and ask those questions and show support. Listen more than you talk, and also don't just have to talk once. It's a really, really strong learning opportunity, not only for the young person in your life, but also for you as the adult. So if you're not really sure of an answer, it's key to be able to turn it into a learning moment. Let's look this up together. Let's figure this out together. I'm not too sure. I don't know. How about let's go find a book on this and read it together? This is going to be showing that same curiosity and showing that same support that they deserve. So to go kind of a bit more into porn literacy and the kind of the themes that we can kind of take from free online porn and to question and critique further, I wanted to leave you wonderful adults here this evening or today with a few questions. You don't need to answer these. They're more of questions of reflection. And this is for those of you who have used porn, continue to like it, it plays some sort of a role in your life, or it had at some point, just to kind of take away and think about them. So about sex, right? So what role does porn play in the way I feel about sex and intimacy? What kind of understandings did it give you? What kind of things did you maybe used to believe about sex based on what you saw in porn, and used to believe about intimacy? What was true? What isn't? What has changed? Racism and fetishization of Black, Indigenous people of color. Ask yourself, does the porn I consume contribute to or reflect any racist stereotypes? Think about the content. Think about the categorization of the porn websites. Think about the titles. What about the objectification of girls and women in porn? Does the porn I consume contribute to or reflect any misogynistic stereotypes? And what about body image? After I consume this, perhaps, do I feel more or do I feel less confident in my skin from what I've seen in porn? And how has what I've seen in porn, especially in relation to bodies, shaped the way I feel about how I feel about the bodies of others? Now, I want to close off today by thanking you all so much, reminding you of our values here at the Porn Conversation, how we've put together our materials. And also, I'm inviting you to discover our free tools. You're welcome to scan this if you want, or you can just visit the website. We have thepornconversation.org. And discover our curriculums, discover our conversation guides. This week, this Thursday, actually, we are going to have our materials available in Spanish and French and German for all ages. And we're really, really excited to have that available to you. We also have an amazing ambassador program. If you feel like you align with our values, we have an ambassador program here. We also have a university student ambassador program that's growing and just filled with wonderful humans. And you can just drop us a line and I'll send you information on that if you feel like it works out with your with your life and your interests. And I'd be happy to give you more information. I want to invite back in Bianca so she can give some more information. I think I'm going to, I want to close the screen just so I can see everyone's faces again, or names, or I can just see something. And then we'll head over to the Q&A section.
Great. Thanks so much, Avril. So as you see the screen change, we'll welcome everybody back in. So a couple of the trainings and courses that I'm offering that are coming up, I have a certification program for people who are really interested in learning more about justice frameworks and incorporating those frameworks into the work that we do in the sexuality field. And that's an ongoing enrolled program. People can sign up for it anytime. My next course is around the theory and practice of intersectionality, coming up later in the month. And then I also do extensive trainings called Sexual Attitude Reassessments, or SARS. So those also are offered throughout the year. I have a specific one coming up in October that focuses exclusively on our feelings and thoughts and understandings of abortion. So if you've never had a training around abortion in your sexuality work, you're welcome to join us. The time is usually Pacific time in the United States. So thanks so much, Avril. We're opening it up for questions. So I think I'm going to pass it back to Eleonora and Avril to bring in some of those questions that are coming in.
Thank you so much, Bianca. Yes, I'm going to be definitely check out everything Bianca has. If you gave the website and everything, right? So you'll be able to find out more about her work and her trainings. And thank you for supporting. I see that there are questions. Yes, Bianca just dropped her website here too, so check it out. I see there was a question about the translations being made into Portuguese. We do have a round 2, hopefully, goal of translations. It's really important to me that the translations are done and peer reviewed and are, the way that we've so carefully constructed them, especially with the wordings that we've used and then kind of the values want to uphold. Sometimes it gets lost when you start translating to different languages. So it's on my plans, I promise. But I go through a big process before I dive into another language just yet. But I have the idea of like second rounds, more languages to come for sure. I see Kiana left a really great comment. I was reading it. She says that she thinks it's important to note to future current educators that adolescent and youth also have a lot of sexual agency and are capable of critical engagement. I completely agree. This is something that I definitely drive home a lot to adults, is just how wise young people are and how much information is out there, and critical engagement is key. What do you think about that, Bianca?
Absolutely. Young people know so much. And I think it's really important for us to challenge the adult supremacy that we may be holding, where we think that because we're older, because we're adults, we know so much more. It really ignores the brilliance that young people have, especially here in the States, where they're organizing on Snapchat to have a school walkout across the country. So they're brilliant in so many different ways. So we need to honor that brilliance and encourage it.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any other questions? I see. Just confirming, I will be sending out. Okay, also, there is a question from Hugo. That do you know any workbook about ethical porn? Sometimes I feel like it can be difficult to find the right arguments when discussing this topics with someone who's completely against porn, or even with parents. So I'm thinking about a good resource I can think, but I'm especially just pertaining to ethical porn.
I think we also have a great article on our blog about that, no?
We do. We have a guide to ethical porn. There was also a really comprehensive guide, now that you remind me. Afterglow created it, and they actually joined forces with the ethical porn communities, and everyone contributed to it. So that's something that you can find on Afterglow. But I am thinking about maybe any workbooks. Hugo, if you can drop me your email, I don't want to skip this question because I know there's so many resources that I definitely have. Thank you. I'm going to copy and paste it.
Yeah, and I'll add, I was writing this in the chat, but this is one of the reasons why starting with media literacy is so important and helpful when supporting, because media literacy invites us to look at media across all different types of forms, which includes billboards and magazines and television, and also even like t-shirts and the slogans that are on our t-shirts. And so this is a really low risk approach for many parents to encourage them to understand media literacy and begin to think about how they want their young people to engage with the media. It's also a way of like scaffolding and building more comfort and getting to a place to talk about things like our bodies, relationships, our relationship with pornography as well is another component that shows up here. So, think about it in that way, where instead of jumping immediately to porn literacy, take a couple of steps back and start with media literacy. It can really help bring in a larger conversation that may be a little bit more comfortable based on like a variety of different perspectives of the family.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Bianca. Okay, I'm just making a note. I am writing down everyone's emails. Okay. Well, this is great because now I'm going to send a nice little comprehensive list to everyone. Thank you. Okay. Or maybe I'm just going to include it when I send the, because there seems to be a lot of emails. I'm going to include it when I send that recording. Is that good with everybody? I will send it to everyone. Thank you. That is much easier. Okay, so if there's not any more questions.
Yes, there are way more. I think that, yeah.
Okay.
So the first one that came in as you were still speaking, let me find it. This person was asking how to end or limit mind geek hegemony in porn industry, considering that it is based on free fruition.
So actually, this is something that's being explored in real time right now. So I don't know. So MindGeek, for anyone who's wondering what that is a conglomerate that owns a lot of the free online porn websites today, including Pornhub. And there were actually now being led by a group called Ethical Capital Partners. And so what the idea is that they're going to be revamping their approach and the way that they are conducting themselves as a business. I don't really know what the outcomes are just yet. I don't really know we've seen it just yet. But this is going to be something to keep an eye on and see what's happening. It's kind of a watch this space moment for them. Do you have anything to add, Bianca, about that?
I would say that there's a couple of things, but the main one is that capitalism is really what's setting us apart from actual liberatory experience. So I think one of the bigger challenges is also the capitalism, how certain processing of the money and the fee, all these things flow into that, which also allows us to talk about like things like unions and pay and all that good stuff that flows into creating content. Everyone should be getting paid a thriving wage, and yet capitalism keeps us apart from that. So these are all other larger topics that I think, yeah. There's another question about how to organize or bring this conversation to schools. So tips approaching schools and looking at this topic. Avril, what have you found has been useful in getting the curriculum into schools?
Parents, families, the schools are afraid of the families. That's been my experience, to be honest. Besides with, in England now, porn is part of the mandatory sex education curriculum. I still get called into a British school here in Barcelona every year to do a porn workshop, which is great. I'm so happy that this is happening. But it's really tough to push sex ed. I don't know where you're based, but I know from like my experience and also growing up in the US, you're going to be met by a lot of red tape and a lot of fear. And I feel like the best way to go about it has been like community organizing, getting a group of parents together, families together, and approaching it in that way, showing interest that these families in the school are interested in providing this to the kids and hopefully putting together the resources to do it. When I was in high school, I grew up in Miami. We had absolutely no sex education. It's known as like one of the most sexy cities in the world, but in most conservative states in the United States. And my friends and I organized and we started an HIV/AIDS awareness group and we brought in educators ourselves. And I mean, it's different because we were teenagers and we had a bit more autonomy there, but it's tough. It's so tough. I don't know, Bianca, if you have any more like recent day experiences.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the parents are the direct way in, and I think also supporting the instructors and the teachers who are doing this work on a regular basis and encouraging that however the funding works in your school district, ensuring that the budget covers and allocates funds directly for sexuality education. You may have to get creative in how you talk about it, but I think being clear about the rules, the expectations of what you want your educator or your young person to know about is really important. And just like Avril said at the beginning of the session, usually people think porn literacy requires there to be images of pornography or ideas of what that's supposed to look like. And instead it can really be a conversation about what did it feel like when you first noticed that you clicked on this thing and a pop-up came up, and what feelings emerged for you. So it can really be a more somatic experience for a young person versus explaining or discussing what pornography is or why it exists. It can really get more to the core of what did it feel like when you realize I'm looking at something that my parents probably don't want me to look at. I'm worried about getting caught or disciplined. That's why one of the scripts in the curriculum is to just begin and say, I get a lot of pop-ups that have a lot of body parts without clothes on. What do you do when that happens to you? Assume that it's already happened to them, and that being a really beautiful way to open up a conversation. So these being other opportunities, I think going in knowing it already happens, it already exists. What can we do about it? I think the final thing would be to partner and support your local public library if you have one, and figure out how you can get on the board, the Friends of the Library, encourage the use of library features, because that's another place that young people go to and can access.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
So there is another question.
Mm-hmm.
So Kim is saying, this is less about sex education and more about ethical, critical consumption of porn. But I'm curious about how taboo genre like power play, etc., factor into this framework. Is there any ethical way to make or consume this kind of content, and what could that look like?
Yeah, interesting question, and I think it brings us to kind of, we're all adults here in this in this room. It brings up the point that porn literacy and education never truly ends, and this is why I really love kind of leaving everyone with these kind of reflection questions, because I do think oftentimes we do look at just like the sex ed, the kid part, the teen part. What are they doing wrong-ish, right? When we can really offer this reflection for ourselves. And so I invite you to question those messages for you. What is it that I enjoy about this? What kind of feelings does it bring me? Is this bringing out something positive in what I'm watching? And how does this reflect the way I conduct myself in my own sexual relationships? And if you have a partner, maybe it's something that you can speak about together. But I do think, it is important to also keep that sex positive mind frame, also understanding that we do have different desires, do have different kinks, and that's okay. But it is important to question it. It's important to understand it on a deeper level sometimes. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would also add that consent is at the core here of those experiences. And we have to keep in mind that body autonomy and self-determination is something that each one of us have. It's a human right. And sometimes we don't think that children have that, but they do. But in this context, I want to add another layer to the question. And that is, many of our young people, especially like high school age, may have questions about different types of kink or power exchange, and they want to know more about it. Maybe they want to engage in it or experience it. And one of the ways that I help people address those particular topics for young people who are interested is to approach this conversation around sensations. So what does it mean to experience certain kinds of sensations throughout your body and mind? And how are you thinking about safety around them? How are you thinking about trusting someone to engage in a particular behavior? And that is not necessarily talking about certain tools or approaches, but instead it's getting young people to understand their body-mind connection. And we do have young people that need a particular type of sensory experience. So not shaming or giving a negative representation about sensory experiences, which can really isolate our neurodiverse young people, but also embracing their understanding that this is what I need for these pleasurable experiences. And maybe they need around figuring out what is and is not useful, but also how to share that in the future when they do decide to have partners and engage in consensual activity as young adults. So those, I think, are really important conversations that our young people want to know more about things like kink and BDSM and power exchange. And sometimes we get really scared about how to answer them. So I usually remind people, think about sensations. What does it mean to have that we have sensations in our body? So yeah.
Yes, and about the fact that ethicality is not about the content itself, no, of what you are aroused by or what kind of porn you watch. It's not about the content of that, but about how you watch that, how aware you are, and how that content was made. So yeah, I think it can be really easy to fall into that shameful ideas of being ashamed of what we feel pleasurable. And yes, as you said, it's always important to keep an open mind and a sex positive approach.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take the next question.
All right. I think this is the last one, if I'm not mistaken. No? I've been following the flow from Kiana.
Yeah, maybe. I just want to make sure.
So Kiana did mention the importance of perhaps of how the porn sites are organized, about adding possibly disclaimers. Hugo said, media, do you recommend specific media for students? I always try to use shows, movies, games, songs, Instagram accounts, examples to approach some topics on sex ed. I think that's really great. I think also, depending on the age group, I think using social media is extremely powerful because it's something that they're consuming on a very regular basis. Shows as well, series, right, that they might be engaging in or something that might be really popular in that age group. It makes it interesting for them and they relate to it more. And so I think that's really, really wise. But also being able to kind of give them that array of different media.
Yeah, I think this is a great reminder that we also need youth mentors. I know oftentimes when we're told to look for mentors, we're always told to look for people older than us. And I want to remind us that we can learn from young people, and we do. And so youth mentors for me looks like people beyond my family. And that means that I have to build a relationship with parents and the community in order to have young people choose to mentor me. And I also have to ask for consent. So different ways, but this is another way that I stay on top of popular culture, the conversations that young people are having, and also knowing my role if I am engaging in youth culture. So places like TikTok or other online apps, knowing what's expected of me and what the culture is on those spaces is also really important. And I learn about that with young people as my mentor. So yeah.
That's super. That's a really, really great idea. All right, everybody. I want to be mindful of the time too. I know we've gone over. I'm really grateful, Bianca, you stuck around for a bit longer. Thank you so much for your time. Just a reminder, everyone, we will be sending out the recording. I will be sending out a resource list. And if you have any other questions that might come up afterwards, feel free to send them my way. And we're more than happy to answer anonymous questions, of course, too, via email if you weren't feeling comfortable here today in the chat group to ask. Thank you so much for joining us all over the world, too. This is really cool. I just saw someone thanking us from India. I hope y'all have a really, really great night or day or morning, wherever we're at. And keep following the porn conversation and ANTE UP and see what Bianca's up to. Thank you.